information that I've gathered on the Hickey family in the last 10 years, and mostly this week, going to the cemeteries and stuff. Okay, the first one would have been my great-great-grandfather, Granville Hickey. He is buried at the Dick Lawson Cemetery in very southern and eastern Miller County. He probably was born in Kentucky or Tennessee, because there was very little settlement up here he was born in 1825, and there was very little settlement up here then. Most of those people from that part came from Tennessee or Kentucky. He was born in 1825, died in 1889. His wife is buried next to him. Her name was Elmina Hickey. She was born in 1818 and died in 1888. They have a daughter that's buried next to him that was born in 1884 and died that same year. Her name was Ida L. Hickey. That would have been Davis's sister. Then it'd be my great-grandfather, Davis Asbury Hickey, was born May 4th, 1875, and died April 1946. He's buried at the Tuscumbia Cemetery. From what I understand, he was a hired hand for Taylor Shelton, who owned the Hickey farm then. That was Grandma Hickey's father, Taylor Shelton. He owned the house down under the hill. That was the original Taylor Shelton farm. And my Cora either inherited or bought it from him. I worked at Tuscumbia in the 60s and 70s, and everybody that would have been Davis Hickey's age, I asked about him. Everybody said he was a very well-known man and very jovial. Everybody liked him that knew him. Davis and Cora Hickey were wed in 1898. Then my grandmother, Mabel, was the firstborn. She was born in 1899, died in 1934 of, they believed to be, cancer. She just wasted away in about 6 months' time. There was no operations or anything in those days, but that's what they thought it was. Mabel Hickey, my grandmother, married Willie Crane, my grandfather, about 1920. And Willie Crane, my grandfather, died in 1930, they think, of appendicitis. My mother was only 8 years old, and she was the oldest in the family and had 3 siblings. So great-grandmother Cora Hickey raised my mother and her siblings, mostly. Some of Wayne stayed with the Crane family some of the time when he was young.
And that was my dad.
Yeah. All right, the living children of Cora and Davis Hickey, the firstborn was my grandmother, Mabel. She was born in 1899. The next was Logan. He was born, I think, 1901. Then Omer, about 1904. Clay, 1906. Then Virgie. And then Myron, you said, was born 14. And I think Rita Joy was born in 1918. Yeah. Okay, the second born Logan was at the Crispin-Thompson feud up at Bagnall in 1923. It was kind of like the Hetfields and McCoys. It was neighbors that could not get along for whatever reason, and they had been in a feud for years, and it all came to a head up at Bagnall at the ferry. There was a shootout. Old man Thompson was killed, and Fred Crispin's son was killed. Logan was there that day, and he was part of it. The book says there may have been some connections to the KKK involved in this feud. Also, my mother told me this. In the early 1930s, after her dad died, she was staying with Cora. There was a murder down at the Lower Hickey house. Two hired hands of Davis Hickey's or Taylor Shelton's got into a fight, and a man by the name of Starks, his last name was Starks, killed a Blue with a shotgun. But Mr. Blue had a pitchfork. There was a coroner's inquest about it, and it was determined to be self-defense. So nobody was ever charged on that. But they were both hired hands of Taylor Shelton. And also, yeah, also of a footnote, I tried to find Cora's second husband was Everett Polk Fancher. From what I understand, the marriage didn't last very long, but I can't find any trace of him in Miller County. And I found an Everett Fancher, but the dates don't line up. So I don't know anything about him. Does anybody here know anything about her second husband?
No, we can only guess.
Yeah.
Seems like I heard he owned a grocery store, and he was fairly well off, but his kids hated her.
Yeah. Well, Cora was considered fairly well off. She owned a lot of land from her father, Taylor Shelton. Joy.
What's the story with my grandmother needing to go to Colorado to get a divorce?
Okay, Glenn can probably tell more about that, the divorce.
Well, at that time, Colorado was the only state that would allow divorce. And our dad went with her out there along with Theda, and he said they almost starved to death because they didn't have money. And he said she did that because she was tired of having kids.
How old was he?
Wait a minute, tell me how a divorce prevents somebody from having kids.
There are other methods to stop that. Well, I think that's about the time that Davis moved out and went on his own.
Well, did he get another woman?
Not that I know of.
Once she came back, they never lived together again.
Yeah.
I have a theory about that. Cora was not a worldly person.
Amen.
She wouldn't have known anything about going to Colorado to get a divorce. I have a theory that her parents said, get rid of him and go get a divorce.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Because Taylor
she,
Shelton was
she
still
must
alive.
not. She must not have really hated him. She married her She named one of her last children, middle name Davis.
Yeah. Well, also, there were 5 children in the family of Cora and Davis that died as babies or before they were 6 years old. So she had a total of 12 children.
No, I got a question. Where is this Hickey house over the hill you referred to?
Okay, at the Hickey farm up on Beckman Bridge Road.
This is the one that Darren still owns?
Yeah, Darren Hickey, JD's son owns it yet, or part of it. And the house up on top of the hill was built in the 1940s. But the old house was Taylor Shelton built it, and that was the house that they all lived in until the mid-40s.
Well, that's not very far.
No,
through
it's
the-
only 4 or 5 miles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was born there in 41, so,
In the old house?
yes.
Okay.
You were, Evelyn?
I think it was 40,
I was born
44, 45, they built the house up on top of the hill.
there.
Another thing, my mother, when she was going to high school in the 1930s and early 40s, she stayed with Davis Hickey at Tuscumbia on the back of a wagon. She was going to high school up there, and that was the only person that she had to stay with.
And I think our
Because
dad
women
stayed
didn't
with him
graduate
some
high
too,
school back
right,
then.
Myrna?
What?
I think our dad stayed with him in Tuscumbia some.
Well, he must have. At that time, Tuscumbia was the only town that had a high school. So if you wanted to go to high school, you had to go to Tuscumbia. Both of my parents graduated from there, and that's where they met. And my mother was very fond of Davis Hickey.
Where was his house in Tuscumbia?
There was no house, as far as I know. He lived on the back of a wagon,
Oh,
down by the.
oh.
You know where the old bar was in Tuscumbia, right along the river, that burnt down. They lived
Kitty's.
next to it.
Down there
Kitties, and
What was it before it was Kitty's?
it was at one time a fellowship of what do they call it in those days?
Not Masons.
It's something like
Big
the
mamas.
Masons.
Oddfellows or something.
Yes,
It might have been like.
I don't remember what they called it, but it was like a club. It was probably built in the early 1900s.
I got another question.
Okay.
Okay,
She won't ever shut up.
where Bill and Judy Lawson's house is, there is a picture of that house with a Hickey sign in front of it.
Okay. Until 1943, Cora and Omer stayed up there in that house, and they farmed that land until 1943. That was the major flood on the Osage River. That's when they moved down here and built the house up on top of the hill.
So they left from Tuscumbia to go over here.
Yes.
So Grandpa and Grandma on the other side own that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that. And my mother lived in that house some. And Omer was farming the farm up there then. And after the big flood, I think it got in that house, the flood did. And they moved then down here.
I want to see this.
So
In
my dad,
93, it got in the
I
basement.
think my dad lived with.
Well, this was 43, and it was 15 foot higher than it was in 86.
That's been over the roof of that house.
Yeah.
so when Cora got this divorce, she still had kids at home then.
Sure.
Yeah, how old was your dad?
Aaron and Theta
Yeah,
were both still at home.
About 10 or 12.
and he went. They
Where
went with
was he
him.
devastated?
You know, my dad didn't talk much about anything. He was a quiet guy. I just remember him saying they almost starved to death on that trip. I don't
Well,
even
it
know
would have
how
been
they
in the
went.
30s. Hard times anyway.
Wasn't Logan out there at that
I
time?
think Logan left. And
Some
went
of them
to
went
St.
out to the
Louis.
wheat harvest in
Yeah, I think.
Kansas during
Yeah, I
that
think
time,
Logan
especially
did
during the
that.
30s.
Lyman, Colorado.
That was the only place there was any
No, it
hard
was
work
Seminole.
around.
Which is next to mine.
Oh,
Joey, did your mother ever talk about it?
She never spoke about much.
Well, I think
None
the
of
whole
them
family may have
did.
been like that.
Logan didn't either.
Yeah, they didn't. We didn't know about this feud till.
Yeah. I didn't know till the last 10 or 15 years, and I just got to research it. My mother never said anything about it, but she never talked a lot about the family.
So where is the Chrisman farm then? On Oak Bend Road, is it right before the Thompsons?
It was up there on the river, right below Bagnell at that time. Fred Christman was farming a farm up there. And
Like where Bianowski owns now?
Yeah.
Okay, that
in
was.
that bend, Thompson's and Christman's owned two farms. They weren't neighbors, but they had to go by each other's place.
Well, I
They
think
were
they-
feuding for years before this.
It was over a Sunday school teacher.
Oh, it was. It was over a teacher in a school had whipped one of the boys or something like that. And in those days, some people didn't have much, didn't have to fight too long, you know.
And so could I mention why Logan was involved?
He was a nephew.
Pardon?
He was a nephew of Fred Christmas.
But why was he there?
Well,
He
okay.
just happened, he would have been there with his cousins that day.
I think he lived
Okay,
with them.
in those days, there was no place to get a job.
Yeah.
And so the oldest child would be sent to a relative to help. And that's the reason that Logan was involved. He was sent to help this. There were only two daughters of Taylor Shelton, Corey and her sister. And so he went to work with the sister.
According to the book, Logan was at the ferry landing when it all happened.
Well, yes.
He went after the Thompson boy that had killed the Chrisman boy and ran him down. And then there were court cases over this deal over the years, and finally the court says we're going to let bygones be bygones. Everybody drop it and quit killing each other.
Right? But then,
Go to your
Thompson,
corner.
Grant Thompson shot Fred Chrisman at the post office
Yeah,
in downtown
that's true.
Bagnell.
Yeah. There were several of them shot going past each other's house
Well, it
with
seems
buckshot.
like Logan took the wounded Thompson
Thompson to get help.
into the house and was
They-
bandaged, there was snow or something.
They,
and
it was real
bandaged
cold
his
weather,
feet.
and they ran him down, and he had almost froze to death because he didn't have shoes or any clothes or heavy clothes on. And he holed up in the house, and after that, they let the boy go. But he was the one that shot the Chrisman boy. The Chrisman boy lived one day, was shot in the back, took to the hospital, and he died the next day. Old man Thompson died at the scene. And I never did hear exactly who shot who. Who shot
Well,
Thompson?
Bob, wasn't there another shooting that happened in town?
Yeah,
Grant Thompson shot Fred Chrisman at the post office.
that's before this feud happened. I mean, they were already feuding, but that was before the murders.
Oh,
Okay.
really?
Yes.
I think the Thompsons were bullies.
Yeah.
I thought it was after.
Let's go track them down.
This is in
I
Bagnell.
think it was after.
We were all